You can call me Jason. And before you ask, no, my career did not start killing monsters. Well, not the ones you read about on forums or in novels. For obvious security reasons, I will not go into detail about the branch I work for. Nor will I use the real names of the people involved in this incident. The call came in after 10 p.m. A catastrophic event had occurred, causing multiple deaths and injuries. My Alpha team, along with 2 others, Bravo and Charlie, were part of a KRF quick reaction force, assigned to rescue a certain group of people at a remote research facility in the mountains of Colorado. My commanding officer, Blackburn, was overseeing the operation via the infrared camera of a Predator drone. Our advisor, a poet who I will call Chuck, was pulling the strings of the option. A woman approached us, escorted by heavily armed guards in plain clothes, just before we boarded the waiting little bird. "Are you the team leader?" Alpha pointed at me with a cell phone in her hand. "Yes, ma'am," I answered quickly. "This is your new mission," he said, as he handed me a photo of an older man combat lab. I shared it with my colleagues. "What is his name?" I asked, hurrying to get out of there. "Dr. Klein, make sure he gets out alive." "I'll be in touch." He disappeared into the growing crowd of support personnel as the helicopters began to take off. We were in the air in a matter of seconds. I lowered the night vision goggles to verify that they were still operational, as I hadn't changed the battery before the alarm, and I feared they wouldn't last long. The 2 tubes emitted a bright green glow that made me squint momentarily. I looked at Bauer, my machine gunner, who gave me a nod of approval. The thermal patch on his arm that identified him as an ally glowed intensely satisfied with the results. I raised the nods and turned them off to save battery. To my right were Clay, our designated marksman, and Simons, the team's assistant. The sky was clear, and the stars were shining with force, giving us a perfect visibility of the terrain. I did a quick check of my rifle and my equipment, making sure that everything was in order, while the helicopter flew over the rocky terrain in the direction of the facilities. I was about to speak with the pilot when a voice was heard on the emergency frequency that we were monitoring here. "Dr. Klein, please. If you can hear this, you must." The transmission was abruptly cut off. A bright flash research facilities, projecting an orange glow that illuminated the surrounding area. Seconds later, a shock wave violently shook the little bird curse. Exclaimed the co-pilot. "We are fine. Continue operatives," reassured us the pilot. As we approached the place, now engulfed in flames from the air, I saw the members of the other security teams entering through the main gate in their EM wrap and transport trucks, while our helicopter surrounded the perimeter. One of the surveillance towers of the north sector was completely engulfed in flames. The tracer bullets from its mounted machine gun were fired in all directions as the ammunition was consumed by the extreme fire. "Who is shooting?" yelled someone on the secondary channel. "Ignore that. Is the tower on fire?" "Understood, we are entering through the door," answered another voice as we made another pass. The east side of the building showed severe damage from an explosion. The roof and the front half were gone, leaving a deep crater in its place. Pieces of burnt paper and debris floated in the air as we made our final approach in a matter of seconds. The little bird descended on the roof of the north section. The pilot kept the helicopter hovering just above the deck, allowing us to disembark quickly. "Alpha team in position," I announced on the command channel, as we located the access door to the roof here. "Bravo team clearing A+D over and out here. Charlie, the east side, is inaccessible. We will enter by land. Over and out. We quickly descended the staircase, clearing our sectors. The emergency lighting projected beams of light in the upper half of the spiral staircase, leaving the lower part plunged in darkness. I turned on the flashlight on my rifle and continued down with the team. What the hell caused that explosion? Bauer muttered from the back of the group, focused, trying to keep the team focused. The silence inside the building was disturbing, the chaos outside. Almost reaching the ground floor, a woman ran out of one of the emergency exits. Instinctively, I raised my rifle, but she raised her hands. "Do not shoot, ma'am. We are not here to hurt you. Go to the first floor." I indicated I asked Clay to the schoolgirl, while we continued our mission. "We have a lot of personnel trying to evacuate, but no sign of the doctor. We are going to the third deck," reported the leader of Bravo team over the command channel. "Understood. We have massive casualties on the east side, starting." "Sir," answered the team leader. "Charlie received Alpha team on the ground floor. Starting, sir, now." I confirmed as I went through another open door. At the bottom of the stairs, the door led us to a large reception area, inside a group of panicked people trying to understand what had just happened. "Command here. Alpha 1. We have reached the reception area. There are multiple civilians awaiting transport. Over." I reported to Blackburn in hopes of receiving further instructions. "Understood, Alpha. 1 more transport vehicles are on the way. Proceed with the mission. Over and out," he replied. Blackburn, a tall man with a broken nose and dressed in a lab coat, approached. "Do you know where Dr. Klein is?" I asked him as I held his arm to prevent him from leaving. He was down on sub-level 2 with me when he started to say, but he started to cough as smoke filled the reception. "I need access to the sub-level." I insisted, pulling him, but he started to resist. "I'm not going back down there," he screamed violently, moving away from me. The man managed to break free and tried to run away, but stopped when I pointed the rifle at his chest. "Give me your access card," I demanded without answering verbally. He handed me the card while covering his face with his hand. "Get out of here," I ordered, pointing to the main entrance. "Command here. Alpha 1, we are moving to a secondary location. Possible communication problems. Over," I reported. "Received, Alpha 1. Keep them informed. Over and out," he replied. "Blackburn." I gathered the team in front of the elevators. "We are going to descend. Gentlemen, cool head and attentive," I told them while sliding the access card through the scanner with a soft ping. The elevator doors opened. The elevator music was playing as I slowly descended to the lower levels. "It's the Platters," commented Bauer, recognizing the song. "My parents always listened to this crap when I was a kid," he added. "Clay, do you realize we're in an elevator in the middle of a fire?" "Right," Clay replied, visibly annoyed. "Cut the chatter guns up. We are almost there," ordered Simons as we looked at the floor numbers counting down. "Welcome to sub-level 1. Have a nice day," announced a female voice just as the music stopped and the doors opened. We slowly stepped out of the elevator with our weapons at the ready secured area. Bauer reported as we cleared the immediate area. The place was covered in bodies and the floor soaked in blood. The waiting room led to a wide hallway where 3 colored lines painted on the floor and walls marked the directions: red observation rooms, blue testing labs, and green staff, break room security offices. With each step, the blood stuck to our boots, made an eerie sticky sound. At the end of the hallway, we came to a large reception area. There was a circular desk in the center with chairs and coffee tables lined up against the walls. More dead bodies were strewn about, mostly from the internal security team. The floor was littered with empty bullet casings and human remains. The only thing we could see was the only thing that identified the bodies were the white patches with the company logo on them, Clay muttered, examining the bodies and adjusting his finger on the trigger. The room had 3 hallways that led to the areas indicated on the walls. Let's check the green route. Dr. Klein was using a radio. He was probably in the security office. He suggested, Clay, sounds good to me. If he's not there, we'll clear the rest, Bauer replied. He took the lead as we followed the green line. The walls and floor were stained with blood, with more empty shell casings scattered along the way. Attention all personnel, please proceed to the nearest emergency exit. A robotic voice announced over the intercom system. A Level C containment breach has occurred. Please proceed to the nearest emergency exit. Alpha 1 here, Charlie. 2 needed. Transmission was interrupted by a burst of gunfire. Charlie 2 here. Alpha 1 transmit. Last change. I tried to reply. Charlie 2 here. Alpha 1. What is your situation, over? I repeated but got no response. Bravo team is moving to assist. Stand by, reported the Bravo leader. As more gunshots and screams echoed through his transmission, all RF teams. What is your situation? Asked Blackburn in a firm and calm voice. Charlie 4 here, we need evacuate immediately, over, another voice replied, but the transmission was cut abruptly as the ground shook violently. Command, this is Alpha 1. We are moving ahead with the mission, over. I tried to use the radio but got no response further down the hall. We found a set of metal doors torn from their hinges, shrapnel facing outwards, and jagged pieces of metal indicated that the explosion had come from within. Entering through the shattered doors, I noticed a severed hand fused with a card scanner on the right side of the wall. The entrance led to a larger room with a side section. The heat of the explosion was still felt on my neck as I ducked to avoid a piece of ceiling fall and barely me safety etiquette. Dr. Klein is here. I called out loud but got no answer. Dr. Klein, if you are here, make yourself known. We are here to evacuate. I insisted. Suddenly an injured woman appeared, crawling around the desk. Overturned, she was muttering something under her breath as she tried to get on her knees. Doc, come here, ma'am. I need you to show me your hands, I asked, pointing at him, and he froze. Simons arrived just then. I pointed at the woman. Check her, see if you know where our man missing. While Simons examined her, Clay and Bauer went into another room. I stayed behind to provide cover. Claire, what happened to you? Asked Simons as he assessed her injuries. The woman with a broken voice. She began to cry hysterically. She killed them all. Sobs I heard. I need you to breathe. Tried to calm her. Simons across the hall, a movement before I could investigate. Clay called me from the next room. What is it? I asked, peeking through the door. The scene inside was absolute chaos. A security guard was sitting in a chair, but the top half of his head was missing. The wall and ceiling were splattered with gray matter and skull fragments. We found the doctor. He is in the cell area. Clay indicated, pointing to one of the monitors. I don't remember how I got out of the security section. The next thing I knew, I was in the hallway towards the observation area. Jason, hold on, Bauer's voice echoed in my headphones. As I turned a corner, I stopped too abruptly in front of me. was what I can only describe as a humanoid figure in music, crouched. Its skeleton jutted out from its flesh at grotesque angles, and it breathed erratically. Jason yelled "Bauer" as he grabbed me by the shoulder and pushed me against the wall. "What was that?" he exclaimed. I pointed to where I had seen the figure, but only a trail of blood remained leading to a side room. "We need to find the doctor and get out of here," I said, pushing him and getting back on track. I did a quick sweep of the room. The figure seemed to have gone too. There were more corpses, overturned tables, and debris. The room looked like a break room, but what caught my eye was a wide-open ventilation duct. I decided to ignore it and continue down the hallway at the end. A large, reinforced door was wide open. "Entrance clear," I said. "Ready when you are," he replied. "Bauer." We walked through the door and into a large, square room. Observation windows and heavy armored doors lined the walls clear. Bauer reported from the left side. "Clear," I confirmed from my side. Most of the room looked abandoned. "I have them in the chamber. The doctor is just outside the room you are in." "Clay informed us, Roger. Keep us informed," I replied as I approached one of the observation windows. Rifle lowered, but prepared inside, I saw what appeared to be a dog, walking in circles inside a cage. Its body was mangled with bones sticking out at unnatural angles. Seeing us, it began to bark and growl, biting the bars of the cage until it opened them enough to move. The animal jumped towards the window with all its strength, hitting it with a nauseating sound. Blood splattered the glass, which began to crack under the blows. "What the hell is that thing?" Bauer asked, incredulously. "I don't know, but let's continue before it comes out," I replied, advancing towards the next window in it. I saw a man tied to a metal table. He repeatedly stabbed me in the abdomen with the ulna and radius bones of his right arm, which was free of its restraints. I have witnessed many horrible things, but that scene left me speechless. Alpha, who is "we," Blackburn's voice, brought me back to the present command here. "Alpha 1 are entering. Broken and illegible change again." There was no response. I made a signal to Bauer to take command, while I followed him to the other entrance. After walking a few meters down the empty hallway, I saw Dr. Klein has come to rescue you. Please come with me. I signaled him to come closer, but a sharp pain ran through my leg in an instant. I found myself face down, dragged into a dark room. I began to kick what was holding my leg, trying to grab onto something to avoid being dragged further inside. I managed to turn on my side, lift the rifle, and aim at the enemy invisible. I fired 2 shots. The flashes illuminated. They mined the room, revealing another figure, similar to the previous ones, with my leg in its mouth. I screamed through gritted teeth, ignoring the bullets that hit near the creature's head. As I looked back, I saw Bauer's silhouette in the doorway, hesitating to shoot for fear of hurting me. "Get this thing off me." I screamed at him as my head hit something. "Stop moving at me," he screamed. The lights in the room came on, and the creature let out a guttural scream before releasing my leg. That was my chance. I tried to stand up, but I felt a strong tug on the back of my plate carrier. Everything reversed, and for a brief moment, I felt weightless. The creature let out another guttural scream before throwing me through what seemed like another observation room. Everything went black. My thoughts were scrambled in my mind. Random memories began to play like a poorly edited movie, scenes that jumped from one moment to another, some in slow motion, 1 second, I was fishing in the river and drinking beers with the boys, and the next kicking the door of a mud hut in a country at war, just as I was enjoying a date at a bar. The woman started slapping me repeatedly while screaming my name, turning the moment into a horror scene. With each blow, her voice and figure changed. Jason Slap, now holding a rifle. Jason Slap, wearing combat gear and a helmet, wakes up at once. Slap! I blinked rapidly and covered my face in an attempt to avoid more blows. What? Stop hitting me! I yelled. Someone was standing over me, glimpsed across the room with a lost look. Blood was starting to seep through a bandage covering his neck. What happened? I asked, confused. As I looked around, the stranger helped me to my feet, stabilizing, blurred, but began to focus. I could barely see out of my left eye. A Thursday, I answered with uncertainty. Strike one. He replied, very well. Where are we? He continued, as he wiped something off my face, causing a slight stinging. A research center. You murmured the left side was completely swollen. I blinked several times before realizing that the person helping me was Simon's. I looked around and saw that I was in some kind of break room with tables and chairs scattered throughout the room. The walls were decorated with pictures of motivational phrases and generic landscapes. All QRF units stand down. All other non-essential personnel are now a viable target. Out the voice of our commander echoed in my head, like a hammer blow with each syllable. I shook my head to clear it, but my vision began to blur again. I felt dizzy, and I began to stagger. Jason, are you okay? I need you in the fight. Buddy Simon said as he grabbed my arm to keep me from falling. His uniform was torn and bloody. An elastic bandage covered his left hand, with 2 pink stains on the bottom. Yes, I'm fine. I lied, trying to reassure him. What happened to your hand? I asked, pointing at the stains. One of those things. He bit my fingers off. He replied in frustration. Where are Clay and Bauer? I asked, feeling my legs heavy, as lead they are, with Dr. Klein. He replied, pointing to the other side of the room there. Clay and Bauer were administering first aid to Dr. Klein, who had multiple lacerations on his arms and face. We have to get to the elevators. Boss. Bauer said between coughs, spitting blood on the floor. The door of the room was barricaded with tables and objects to prevent the entry of any threat. Limping, I approached Bauer and Clay as a burning pain ran up my leg. With each step, I squeezed Clay's shoulder and pointed to the door. There's a bunch of that stuff, and outside we'll have to move quickly. Bauer warned as he positioned himself to the right of the entrance. Frag suggested Clay, I don't want to get trapped down here. Bauer replied as he pulled a flashbang grenade from his flash and crash kit. He proposed it was our best option to gain a few seconds. Sounds good. Let's go. I nodded, starting to clear the barricade. Waiting, I began the countdown. 3, 2, 1. I opened the door slightly, leaving enough room for Bauer to throw the flashbang grenade into the hallway without exposing ourselves too much. I slammed the door shut just after the grenade left the frame, and a split second later there was a loud T from the other side. We were greeted by the sound of screams. I saw 2 of the creatures to the right of the entrance covering their eyes, stunned by the explosion. I let loose, a controlled burst of gunfire, raking their legs and stomachs, making them fall. Move, I yelled out loud. Come on, move. Bauer replied, taking the lead while I brought up the rear. We moved to the left and advanced quickly towards the reception area. Each quick step sent a wave of extreme pain or my injured leg. but I ignored it and tried to keep up. The others were moving with speed, making it difficult. Bauer shouted, kneeling and covering our left flank, while firing short bursts towards a group of creatures emerging from the testing lab area. I knelt meters behind Bauer to cover myself. While he advanced towards the elevator, I opened fire on the creatures chasing us. A loud bang resounded behind me, but I ignored it and focused on the enemies approaching. Simons and the doctor were already in the elevator that was open. "Jason Bauer, move now," Simons shouted over the gunshots. "Run, B, run," he added, holding the door open with one hand while firing with the other riff among us. I quickly noticed that some were wearing torn medical clothing, while others were naked. Blood soaked their hands and feet. Just as I was about to reload, Bauer stopped next to me and unleashed a long blast. With his SA stopping the last group of stragglers, the bodies lay on the floor in disarray. One of the creatures fell at our feet, still writhing and trying to claw at us. I heard a clear pink behind me. I looked and saw the other elevator doors stuck half open. Smoke began to fill. Rapidly, the hallway from the elevator shaft to Jason Bauer. "Are you okay?" asked Sim or Simons. "Clay, copy me." I responded quickly, but got no answer. I released the empty magazine from my rifle and loaded a new one before closing the bolt. "Clay Simons, can you hear me?" I tried again. Jason Jesus replied on the verge of a scream. "Are we okay? Is there a fire escape nearby?" I asked, hurriedly. Aware that the radios could fail, soon they have to go through the test labs. There is a fire exit on the southeast side. You don't have one. I answered CL before the transmission cut out. Bauer said, stepping over the creature dying. I started walking down the hall. "Yes, boss," Bauer replied, leaning against the wall and breathing heavily. "Let's get out of here, moving." The lights went out, leaving us in complete darkness. "Knots down," I whispered as I lowered the visor and turned it on the hallway, lit up with a bright green glow on the move I reported. As I turned the corner into the testing lab area, I spotted two creatures feeding on a dead scientist a few feet away from me. Their eyes glowed in night vision. I activated my IR laser and aimed at the head of the applause. First one, 2 bullets in the chest and 1 in the head were enough to immobilize her tango. Down in movement, I reported the testing labs were divided into 3 large sections. Where the hell is the fire escape? "Yes, I know, Bauer behind me. Calm down, look for a sign," I replied, as he scans the area for signs. Shards of glass and lab equipment were scattered everywhere. "Parts, hello?" a voice called from my right. I approached with the rifle raised. "Hello? Is someone there?" he asked again. The voice came from inside one of the labs whose door was open, letting out a dim light. I signaled Bauer to cover the right flank. While I advanced towards the door, we quickly entered, clearing our sectors clear. Bauer whispered clear. I confirmed the lab was empty. A laptop rested open on a stool playing a looped video at full volume. "Hello? Is someone there?" I approached the laptop. I closed it, trying to turn it off, but it didn't work. I placed it on a table and began clicking frantically to stop the VDE, while I tried a loud crash resounded in the room across from Bauer. Frantically for me to duck and be quiet. Something made the lab equipment fall to the floor, right next to me, and I stopped dead in front of another lab table. A guttural screech echoed in the empty hallways, followed by another just above me, and several more coming from outside the room. I looked up and saw one of the creatures perched on the lab table above me. My heart was beating like a drum against my chest as the creature slowly approached my head. "Hello, there's someone there." The voice from the laptop broke the silence, causing the creature to jump towards it, crashed into several machines, knocked to the ground with a rumble. I moved slowly towards the door where Bauer had come out. I turned left and saw 4 more creatures crawling towards us on all 4s. I slid only as possible. Alpha 1, the transmission sounded like glass, breaking in an empty building. I immediately lowered the volume on my headphones, hoping to avoid the worst. But several piercing shrieks echoed behind me. "Run, run, B, roar, Bauer," as he unleashed a burst of gunfire with his say. The muzzle flashes illuminated the hallway with ghostly shadows behind each. I shot random objects, flying before my eyes as I ran full speed down the hallway. I stopped a few meters away to cover Bauer. "Bauer, move," I yelled, as I fired at the growing group of creatures advancing towards us. "Move, move." I ran towards my position. "Move," he insisted. A few seconds later, as I maneuvered towards him, I saw a glowing sign with a fire symbol and a staircase. Bauer on the right, I ran past him and tried the door. Luckily, it was unlocked. We managed to climb 5 floors before the creatures reached the door. Their incessant chatter filled the stairwell. "Oh, this one," he muttered. Bauer stopped halfway and pulled a fragmentation grenade from the pouch he carried in his plate carrier. He removed the tape securing the pin to the body of the grenade and looked at me briefly. "Eat this, you fucking morons." He pulled the pin and threw the grenade over the railing. The explosion. It destroyed most of the creatures. Some were impaled by shrapnel and pinned against the wall. The section of the staircase was destroyed, preventing the rest of the creatures from following us. "Let's go," I said, tapping him on the shoulder. We continued up the hallway. It was almost dark, except for the dim orange light coming in from outside. I came out of the fire escape and found a scene of chaos. People were running in all directions. A man with an axe embedded in his skull lay at my feet, momentarily catching my attention. I snapped back to reality when someone landed headfirst next to me with a loud crack. I didn't even bother to look down. According to plan, the rest of the team should be on the roof. A sudden explosion threw me to the ground. As I reached the hallway leading to the roof, my vision blurred, and a high-pitched beeping filled my ears. I struggled to stand, but barely made it when Bauer appeared in front of me, pulling me and guiding me down the hallway. Just as I started to move, something hit me hard in the side. Throwing the figure to my feet, I kicked hard, hitting her chest and making her stagger back. I quickly pulled my Glock out of the holster on my hip and fired several rounds into her chest, causing her to collapse in a heap on the floor. Bauer was still struggling with someone as I stood up. "Fuck you," Bauer yelled as he held the person's head in his hands and slammed it against the wall with a sickening zun. He continued to punch her repeatedly until a wet crunch confirmed the end of his victim. I tried to get him out of there, grabbing him by the shoulder, but he turned around and punched me in the face. I limped out to the roof just as a Black Hawk helicopter roared at low altitude and landed on the side of the building, kicking up dust and smoke everywhere. The rest of the team and the Dr. Klein quickly climbed into the crew compartment. I was halfway there when the crew chief and door gunner opened fire with guns, mounted a treater round, passed dangerously close to me. I dove into the compartment just as more creatures poured out the door and charged towards our helicopter. As we took off, one of the creatures managed to get the upper half of its body into the compartment. It grabbed the crew chief's leg and dragged him to the center. "Get it out now," the chief shouted, as I stuck the barrel of my rifle in the creature's face and pulled the trigger twice. The head exploded in a fountain of blood and guts, and the creature fell, taking the crew chief with it. I stood up and fired from the cannon mounted on the door into the mass of creatures growing on the roof. Body fragments and flesh flew through the air as the .50 caliber shells did their work. The creatures began to launch themselves from the building, indifferent to their own lives, landing on vehicles and security personnel on the ground. Some men took refuge in the M-wraps, but the creatures tore the doors and hatches off, as if they were tin cans, dragged the men out of the vehicles, and destroyed them without mercy from the air. I continued to concentrate my fire on the positions that still resisted, but the mounted cannon began to glow orange and smoke. I made a signal that the weapon was inoperative and alerted the gunner, who indicated to the pilot that we stand down. I dropped into the seat while I raised the knots. Bauer slapped me on the helmet with a smile that revealed that he was missing a tooth and had a split lip. "We did it," he said before resting his head on the cargo net. Clay, with a broken nose and a hole in his right cheek, pulled hard on my plate carrier. "You are a tough-as-hell boss," he commented, giving me a friendly punch before looking out the window towards the lights of a distant town. The Black Hawk began to gaining altitude away from the chaos, as the whirring of the rotors drowned out all other sounds. I began to fall in a state of unconsciousness, but Simons shook my shoulders forcefully. Jason yelled, which I responded blinking several times. "Tiredness. You have to stay awake, buddy," he said, giving me a light slap on the face. "I'm fine, Doctor. Thanks," I replied with a thumbs up. Suddenly, Dr. Klein began to scream hysterically as he shook me. "They have to turn us around," he said. "Out of use. They are bad people. They're going to torture us for days as soon as we land," he yelled as he tried to make his way towards the cockpit. The door gunner pulled out his service pistol and pointed it at the doctor's head. "Someone check on this guy." Bauer took over. He held him tightly, forced him to sit down, and pointed his pistol at the doctor's face. "If you do that again, I'll shoot you," he said in a firm voice. The doctor stopped moving after that, Alpha One. "Are you reading me? What is it?" "Your status change." Blackburn's voice sounded on edge command. "We are. RTB change." I responded quickly. "Understood, be warned. When you touch down, comply with all orders, given change." That last statement left me confused. "Wilco out," I answered. Although the boys were too exhausted to give it any importance, they barely nodded. "Leaving." Of course, they had received the order. We landed in a place I didn't recognize. We were greeted by heavily armed men. They stripped us of our weapons and equipment with cold efficiency. One of them put a hood over my head and cuffed my hands behind my back. A metallic click echoed in the room as a door opened. They pushed me forward and forced me to sit on a metal chair. They removed the hood and I half closed my eyes as the bright light hit me. I tried to orient myself, but everything was strange in the two-way mirror in front of me. I saw my reflection, a swollen face, bruised and bloodied. I was exhausted, and the pain stabbing throughout my body reminded me of the wound's recent Jason here. It says you've been operating for about 9 years. Is that true? A female voice asked. 2 people entered the room from the Middle East to Afghanistan, Europe, and Africa. The list goes on and on. It's quite a resume, she added while looking through a file. I recognized the voice. It was the same woman who had assigned us the mission to rescue Dr. Klein. I didn't answer. I just waited for the next question. You and your team managed to capture the target you assigned to you. Is that correct? He continued looking up from the file. Yes, ma'am, I answered, but something didn't add up. Why did you refer to Dr. Klein as a target? I have to ask you a few more questions, is that? Okay, he said in a calm tone. Go ahead, I answered, trying to stay calm. Did you take document or record something, you and your team, while you were down there? He asked. I felt a strange sensation in my head, as if my face was burning. Only recordings from my helmet camera, ma'am. She nodded. She closed the file and stood up. You did something good here. Remember that, she said while I opened the door. Wait, what about my team? I asked before he went out. He paused, as if considering his words. They are being interrogated just like you. The doctors will come to check your wounds. Do not do anything you might regret. He concluded before leaving. Leaving me alone again the following days were torture. They subjected me to multiple checkups and medical treatments, making sure I had no serious after effects. I tried once, but the attempt ended with 3 broken ribs and a deep cut on my cheek that required 6 stitches as a reward. I was moved to a small isolation cell and constantly monitored to make things worse. The guards played music at a deafening volume, from the Beach Boys to children's songs and classical music. The constant noise felt like a twisted form of punishment. 3 days later, they took me to another room. This time there was a camera mounted on a tripod in a corner. In front of me were Cindy, the woman from before, and a man who looked like her superior, Chuck dressed in a suit. Cindy instead civilian clothes. Her presence radiated authority in a way that was intimidating. You are not a prisoner here. Jason, stop acting like... One said, Cindy, looking at me seriously. Then why do you treat me like one? I replied, trying to control my temper. You almost killed 4 of my men trying to escape. What did you expect me to do? She replied, your team doesn't act like that. Why do you? Her tone insinuated that she was playing some kind of mind game. I simply replied, I'm sure they don't. She slid a folder to my side of the table. There are things out there much more dangerous than what you faced in those labs, she said, holding my gaze. I'm recruiting people for a task force. Consider this an opportunity to do something really good in this world. Jason stood up. He walked over to my side of the table, waiting for my answer, and if I refuse, I asked, think about it. Jason answered calmly. I opened the file inside. There were declassified reports describing recent events, skinwalkers, terrorizing farms in Texas, a deadly disease of unknown origin, devastating rural towns in Eastern Europe, sex trying to bring about the end of the world in Mexico. The list continued. I closed the file, my mind processing what I had just read. I looked Cindy straight in the eyes. When do I start and